The hallway floor was cold under Ellie's bare feet as she bolted down the corridor, her little hands gripping the walls to steady herself. Her heartbeat pounded louder than the ticking clock on the living room wall. The door was open. Her stepfather stood there, smiling. "No. Please, Mom. I don't want to go with him." Ellie's voice cracked. 8 years old, hair unbrushed, cheeks wet with tears, her small body shook as she blocked the doorway. "You're embarrassing yourself," her mother snapped, not even looking her in the eye. "Get your coat. He's been waiting." "I'm scared," Ellie whispered. "Please. I don't feel good." Her stepfather reached out. His fingers brushed her shoulder, and she flinched so hard she nearly fell backward. The smile on his face didn't change. His eyes flicked to her mother, who was now checking her phone. "I'm not going. I'm not going," Ellie said again, grabbing the doorframe like it was the edge of a cliff. Her mother rolled her eyes. "Don't start again. He's trying. You need to try, too. I don't want to hear any more lies." Lies. That word. It felt like a slap. Ellie stared up at the man she feared. She didn't know the right words to describe what he did, but her body remembered. The bruises. The cold threats. The way he smiled when her mother wasn't watching. He crouched to her level. "You'll be fine, Cupcake," he said softly. "It's just for the weekend. We're gonna have fun." Ellie looked at her mother one last time, silently pleading with her eyes. But her mother was already walking away, annoyed, tapping a message into her phone. The stepfather gripped Ellie's wrist, not hard at first, but tight enough that she winced. As he pulled her down the front steps, Ellie let out a scream so loud, even the neighbor's dog began barking wildly. But no one opened their doors. No one came. 2 hours later, Ellie sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room of an urgent care clinic. Her legs dangled above the floor. She didn't move. She didn't speak. Her lips were cracked from crying. The man had dragged her into the clinic saying she had a stomach bug. He sounded calm, polite, even apologetic. The receptionist believed him, until she noticed the child's silence. "Hi there, sweetie," the receptionist said kindly. "Are you okay?" Ellie didn't answer. She just stared past her. The receptionist noticed the way she sat, arms tight across her stomach, one foot slightly swollen. There was dirt on her pant leg and a red mark on her wrist. She looked back at the man, who was now scrolling his phone. "What happened to her hand?" she asked. "She fell," he replied quickly. "She's clumsy. Keep saying she's sick, but she's not." The receptionist gave a small nod, but her eyes lingered a second longer on Ellie. Something wasn't right. When the nurse called Ellie's name, she didn't react. "Come on," the man said sharply, nudging her. Ellie stood slowly, like every muscle in her body ached. Inside the examination room, Dr. Harper was reviewing notes when they entered. He was a pediatric specialist, soft-spoken, kind-eyed, but trained to notice the quiet details others missed. "Hi, Ellie. I'm Dr. Harper. You're safe here. I just want to help you feel better." She didn't look at him. The man stayed in the corner of the room, arms crossed, watching. As Dr. Harper gently reached for Ellie's hand to check her pulse, he saw it. Bruising. Thin lines. Not from a fall, no chance. He slowly pushed her sleeve up. More bruises. Finger-shaped. Recent. His stomach tightened. He cleared his throat. "Sir, I'd like to speak to Ellie alone for a moment." Standard policy. The man hesitated. "Is that really necessary?" "Yes. Just for a few minutes." The man's eyes flickered, but he nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Inside, Dr. Harper knelt beside Ellie. Ellie, did someone hurt you? Silence. He looked at her face, expressionless, empty. But then, her eyes shifted slightly, just enough to meet his. Her lip trembled. And she whispered, "Please don't make me go back with him." The words were barely audible. Dr. Harper tapped the emergency button under the desk. Within seconds, a social worker and another nurse entered quietly. They spoke to Ellie in soft voices, asking if they could examine her more carefully. She nodded. They uncovered more injuries. Some healing. Some fresh. Fingernail scratches on her back. A healing fracture in her arm that had never been properly treated. Multiple internal bruises. Ellie didn't cry. She just sat still. Too used to the pain. Then came the X-rays, and what they revealed made the room go quiet. Old rib fractures. Signs of shaking trauma. A scar near her spine from a burn that had never been reported. Outside, her stepfather grew restless. He walked up to the front desk. "What's taking so long?" "She's undergoing some tests," the receptionist replied. "Please have a seat." He huffed but sat down again. In the back room, Ellie drew a picture with crayons the nurse had brought her. A house. A small dog. A girl with tears. And beside it, a man. With red lines on his arms. And something that looked like a shovel. Ellie's mother was called. She arrived 40 minutes later, makeup smudged, face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous," she shouted at the nurse. "She's just being dramatic again." Dr. Harper calmly approached. "Ma'am, your daughter has multiple injuries, some very serious. These aren't from a single fall. They're consistent with repeated abuse." She laughed nervously. "That's not possible. My husband, he's never touched her. Ellie just wants attention. She's done this before." The social worker stepped in. "Actually, there is no record of previous complaints. If she tried to speak up in the past, no one filed anything. Until now." The mother's face went pale. Police arrived shortly after. The stepfather stood up the moment they entered. "What's going on?" he said, eyes narrowing. "Mr. Callan?" the officer asked. "Yes? We have some questions for you." "I didn't do anything." "That's what we're going to find out." They led him outside. Back in the exam room, Ellie sat curled in a blanket. The nurse brought her hot cocoa. Her hands trembled as she held the cup. "Do you want to tell us more?" the social worker asked gently. Ellie didn't speak for a long time. Then she nodded. She whispered, "He said, if I ever told, he'd bury me like my dog." "Like your dog?" the social worker asked softly. Ellie pointed at her crayon drawing. "He buried him in the woods. I saw him from my window." Tears ran down her face now. "He said I was next if I talked." By evening, the hospital had a full report compiled. And a horrifying pattern emerged. Ellie had gone to school less and less in the past year. She had more doctor visits but always with explanations that sounded rehearsed. "She's clumsy. She trips a lot. She's emotional." No one had looked deeper. Until today. That night, Ellie was placed in protective custody. She would not be going home. Not yet. Maybe never. As she lay in a warm hospital bed, a soft nightlight glowing beside her, she turned to the nurse and asked, "Will he find me?" "No," the nurse said, brushing her hair gently. "Not ever again." Ellie closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. But outside that room, the investigation was just beginning. Because when detectives searched the man's phone, what they found wasn't just messages. It was videos. Unimaginable. And one of them showed a location. A spot in the woods. Marked with a cross made of sticks. The forest was quiet when the officers arrived. Early morning fog still clung to the ground like ghosts, making every tree trunk look like a shadow of something darker. The detective, Sergeant Lisa Grant, stepped out of her car and tightened her coat. Her eyes scanned the dirt path ahead. Just 30 feet in, under a crooked birch tree, there it was. Exactly like in the video. A crude wooden cross. 2 sticks tied together with a shoelace. The same cross that had appeared for a second in that horrifying video recovered from the suspect's phone. They approached carefully. A forensics team followed behind, placing yellow markers and snapping photographs. A young officer knelt by the spot and began to brush away loose dirt. Within minutes, he found it, fur. Lisa felt her stomach twist. The small skeletal remains of a dog were buried just beneath the soil. Just like Ellie had said. But that wasn't what disturbed her most. It was the next thing they found, buried deeper, wrapped in plastic. It wasn't human. But it was something else that told a darker story: children's clothes. Torn. Blood-stained. Burnt on one side. This wasn't just animal cruelty. This was the sign of a disturbed man. And possibly, a history of hidden violence. Meanwhile, back at the children's hospital, Ellie woke slowly. The sun had begun to rise outside, painting the room in warm gold, but the nightmares of the night still clung to her like spiderwebs. She turned her head and saw a woman sitting by her bedside. Not her mother. This woman had soft, tired eyes and a file open in her lap. "Good morning, Ellie. I'm Marla. I'm with the Department of Child Protection. Would it be okay if we talked for a bit?" Ellie didn't answer. Marla gave a small smile. "You're very brave, you know that?" Silence again. Sometimes, people don't believe children when they should. But the doctors believe you. The nurses do too. And the police, well, they found something in the woods. Just like you said. Ellie looked at her for the first time. "My dog?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Marla nodded slowly. "Yes. We're so sorry." Tears welled up in Ellie's eyes, but she didn't cry. She just stared out the window. Marla sat with her in silence for a long moment. Then she said, "Ellie, we need to ask you some questions. You can stop anytime. But every detail you remember will help us protect you. And maybe others, too." Others. That word caught Ellie's attention. She sat up straighter. "I heard him," she whispered. Marla leaned in gently. "Heard who?" "Him. At night. Talking to someone, on the phone. He said. She doesn't remember what I did to the first one." The interview room at the police station was quiet except for the hum of a ceiling fan. Brandon Callan, Ellie's stepfather, sat across from Detective Grant, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You've got nothing," he said coldly. "This is just some little girl acting out." Lisa dropped a folder on the table. Slowly opened it. Photos. Of the bruises. The healing fractures. The dog's remains. And then, she slid forward a still shot from the video. The cross in the woods. Brandon's face flickered for just a second. "Coincidence," he muttered. "That's not even my land." Lisa smiled faintly. "But your shoe prints were there. Your phone GPS placed you at the site 3 weeks ago. And your fingerprint was found on the tape that wrapped the plastic." Brandon didn't speak. "We've got enough to charge you," Lisa continued calmly. "But here's what I think, you didn't just hurt Ellie. I think there's more. Another child. Or maybe more than one." His jaw tensed. "I want a lawyer," he said sharply. "You'll get one," Lisa replied. "But you'll also get a cell." And if there's anyone else you hurt, we'll find them. That evening, Ellie sat with Marla again. There was a girl once, Ellie whispered. She came to our house. Just one time. I think her name was Kayla. Marla straightened. Do you remember anything else? She had red hair. And a bracelet with butterflies. She was older than me. Maybe 10. I think she was scared too. Do you know where she went? Ellie shook her head. She never came back. That night, police started digging into missing persons records. And they found it. Kayla Benson. Age 10. Last seen 3 years ago. Her foster family had reported her missing during a visit with a temporary guardian, name not fully documented. A dead end at the time. Until now. Back at the hospital, Dr. Harper visited Ellie just before bedtime. He smiled softly, carrying a small stuffed dog. I know it's not the same, he said, placing it on her bed. But I thought maybe he could keep you company tonight. Ellie looked at the toy and slowly hugged it to her chest. Dr. Harper, she asked. Yes? If I go to a new house, will it be safe this time? He nodded. It's our job to make sure of it. We won't let anyone hurt you again. She whispered, promise? I promise. But the case was far from over. Ellie's mother had been brought in for questioning. Not as a suspect, yet, but the detectives wanted answers. You knew about the bruises, Lisa said. I thought she was clumsy, her mother replied, defensive. She always said weird things. I thought she was just acting out. She begged you not to send her with him. She was 8. Kids say things. Lisa leaned forward. He's being charged with aggravated assault, child endangerment, and possible involvement in the disappearance of another girl. Are you telling me you didn't see anything? Silence. Then a whisper, I was scared of him too. By the weekend, news of the arrest spread. It made headlines across local and national media. Stepfather arrested after hospital uncovers shocking abuse case. In the comments, thousands of people expressed horror, outrage, and heartbreak. But one comment stood out. A woman claimed she had once dated Brandon Callen. And she had a story too. Ellie was moved to a temporary foster home under 24-hour monitoring. A kind older couple named the Whitmans agreed to take her in while the investigation continued. Their home smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry. Mrs. Whitman braided Ellie's hair gently that first night and said, you don't have to talk. You just have to rest. But Ellie spoke. She said, do you lock the door at night? Yes, sweetheart, Mrs. Whitman said. Why? Ellie looked at the window. Then whispered, because sometimes, he said he could get through windows. Meanwhile, investigators followed up on the tip from the woman online. She provided photos, old ones, of Brandon at a cabin deep in the woods outside state lines. They got a search warrant. What they found there? Stained children's clothes. Photographs. Journal entries. A lockbox full of burned ID cards and old toys. And buried in a corner of the cabin, a second grave. Back at the foster home, Ellie began speaking more freely. She asked for paper. She drew. Not just dogs and trees, but faces. One face she drew again and again. It was Brandon's. But in each drawing, something changed. In one, his eyes were black holes. In another, his smile stretched unnaturally wide. He came into my dreams, she whispered to Mrs. Whitman. He said he's still watching. But when they showed her photos of other missing children, she froze at one face. That's Kayla, she said. She was in the cabin. The FBI was brought in. The case had now crossed state lines. And Brandon Callen was no longer just a suspect. He was potentially a serial predator. The charges were upgraded. The community reeled. But in a quiet room at the hospital, Dr. Harper looked at the case files and whispered to himself. How many Ellies never got to speak? And yet, even now, something felt unfinished. Ellie woke up one night from a dream, crying. She said there was another place. A house he took her to once. Not the cabin. Not the woods. A basement. With a locked room. She said her name, Ellie whispered to Marla the next morning. It started with L, she said, please tell my mom I didn't run away. Ellie woke in a cold sweat. Her little body shivered beneath the soft pink quilt the Whitmans had lovingly wrapped her in the night before. The foster home was safe. It smelled of cinnamon toast and clean cotton sheets. But her dreams didn't know that. Her nightmares still belonged to him. She sat up slowly in bed, hugging her knees, her throat dry. She turned toward the small nightlight near the door, then whispered. Lena. That was the name. The girl from the basement. At precisely 8 a.m., Marla arrived at the foster home to begin Ellie's trauma processing session. The little girl greeted her with a hug this time, something she hadn't done before. It was cautious but real. I remembered something else, Ellie said as they sat at the kitchen table. Mrs. Whitman offered them both warm oatmeal and toast with honey. Ellie barely touched hers. Okay, Marla said gently, taking out her notepad. What did you remember, sweetheart? There was another house, Ellie said, not blinking. Not the one with the woods. Not the cabin. Marla leaned in, alert. He took me there once. I think it was far. I fell asleep in the car, but when I woke up, it smelled like wet bricks. Like something dead. What did you see there? There was a room downstairs. No windows. It was dark. I heard her voice from inside. Marla froze slightly. A girl's voice? Ellie nodded. She said her name. Lena. She was crying. She said, tell my mom I didn't run away. A chill ran through Marla's spine. Ellie, she said slowly, can you remember what the house looked like? Ellie bit her lip, thinking hard. It had a red door. And wind chimes. And something hanging from the porch, like a metal bird. Back at the police station, Detective Lisa Grant and her partner, Officer Ramos, reviewed dozens of photos of properties linked to Brandon Callen. He's never owned a red door property, Ramos muttered, flipping through folders. But, wait, he worked construction part-time a few years ago. With a property management company. Look at this. Lisa leaned in. What is it? A foreclosure he maintained once. 2 years ago. On the city's edge. Abandoned. No official connection to him, but, look at this photo. Lisa stared at the image. A small, run-down house. Overgrown grass. Faded paint. But unmistakable. A red door. Wind chimes. And a rusted metal bird nailed to the porch beam. She exhaled slowly. Get the warrant. The house had been uninhabited for years. Neighbors had long assumed it was abandoned for good. That morning, a full investigative team moved in. Lisa led the way inside. The front room was empty except for dust, a broken couch, and cobwebs. Basement door, Ramos said, pointing toward the narrow hallway. They approached carefully. The wooden door creaked open, revealing steep, dark stairs. The smell hit them instantly. Old water, mildew, and something else. Something metallic. Decay. Lisa clicked on her flashlight and descended first. Halfway down, her foot hit something. A lock. Rusted. Broken. At the bottom, they found it. A concrete room, windowless. One hanging bulb flickered weakly overhead. Scratches covered the inside of the door. Nail marks. Desperate lines carved into wood. And on the far wall, written in crayon. I didn't run away. Please help me. Lena. Back at the station, a phone rang in missing persons. Officer Miles picked it up, listened carefully, then called out. Detective Grant? We've got something. Lisa arrived moments later. The name Lena, any match? She asked quickly. Lena Dalton. Reported missing 3.5 years ago. Age 11. Foster care system. Disappeared during a weekend visit to her assigned temporary guardian. Case went cold. Lisa stared. Who was the guardian? The officer hesitated. Then turned the file around. The name on the page. Brandon Callan. Ellie was watching cartoons quietly when Marla returned that afternoon, her face pale. The moment Marla stepped in, Ellie looked up and asked, "Did you find her?" "We found the place," Marla said softly, sitting beside her. "And we found what she wrote on the wall." Ellie's face crumpled. She leaned against Marla's shoulder and whispered, "She didn't get out, did she?" Marla didn't respond right away. She just wrapped her arms around the small girl. Forensics team scoured the basement room. Blood was found. Trace DNA. A tattered butterfly bracelet wedged beneath the floorboards. It matched the one Ellie had described in part 2, Kayla had worn one. But now, it seemed Lena had, too. 2 girls. 2 graves. Not yet. Not this one. There was no body. Yet. Back in the interrogation room, Brandon sat alone for 36 minutes before Lisa entered again. She dropped another file on the table. "Lena Dalton," she said. He said nothing. Lisa opened the folder and placed the photo of the crayon writing on the table. She didn't run away, Brandon. She begged for help. You left her there. He stared at the wall. She's dead, isn't she? Lisa asked, flatly. He smirked. Can't prove that. Lisa didn't blink. Ellie described the house. In detail. She knew about the bird. The chimes. The basement. The scratches on the inside of the door. We have a witness. And now we have DNA. Still, he smiled. You'll never find her body, he whispered. Meanwhile, Ellie's mother, under immense pressure, began to crack. She showed up unannounced at the station, demanding to speak with Lisa. I didn't know, she cried. I didn't know it was this bad. Lisa stared at her, arms crossed. You had chances. You ignored the bruises. You dismissed her fears. You left her with a man who threatened to bury her. I thought she was lying. No. You chose not to see. Tears streamed down the mother's face. She used to cry at night. I told her to grow up. I thought she was being dramatic. Lisa's voice turned hard. You don't get to cry now. Your daughter survived. But others didn't. Ellie began drawing again. This time, it was clearer. 2 girls in a dark room. One with red hair. One with long black braids. Lena and Kayla. In the corner of the drawing, a window with no glass. A light bulb. A small camera in the ceiling. Ellie said, he watched us. Through that. Detectives returned to the house. Behind the paneling near the basement ceiling, they found it. A hidden camera. The storage card was removed. But the wiring traced back to a cloud server. Warrants were issued. The digital evidence was recovered. And what they saw broke even the most experienced officers. Kayla. Crying. Holding Lena. Whispering songs to her. And then, weeks later. Lena. Alone. Still singing. Still waiting. And then, she was gone. The footage ended. No burial. No escape. Just darkness. Marla sat with Ellie that night. "You've saved lives," she said. Ellie didn't respond. "Because of you, we found 2 missing girls. And we're going to keep digging." Ellie nodded. "He always said, no one would believe me. That I was just a kid." Marla smiled softly. "But they did believe you. And they'll believe the others, too." In the final scene of the day, a team of forensic dogs searched the back of the Red Door house. Behind the garden. Past a row of overgrown bushes. And then, one barked. Then dug. 6 feet down, the shovel hit something hard. The garden behind the Red Door house was wild and overgrown, full of tangled weeds, broken flower pots, and rusted tools. It hadn't seen care in years. But underneath the twisted vines and patches of damp earth, a secret had waited in silence. The forensic dogs had stopped at the far corner, barking, digging, then freezing. "Right here," one handler confirmed. "We've got something." Detective Lisa Grant, dressed in gloves and boots, stepped forward. The wind was still, but the moment felt heavy, like even the air was bracing for what would come next. 2 officers began to dig carefully, removing layers of soil. Inch by inch. Then came the plastic. A black garbage bag, brittle with age. Duct tape wrapped around it in 4 places. Lisa crouched down beside it. "Stop." Everyone froze. She leaned in closer and saw it, beneath the first fold of plastic, a child's shoe. Pink. Scuffed. Faded butterflies on the side. A quiet wave passed over the team. No one said a word, but everyone knew. They had found her. Back at the foster home, Ellie sat in silence at the kitchen table. She wasn't eating, just watching the spoon swirl in her cereal bowl. Mrs. Whitman noticed. "Nightmares again?" she asked gently. Ellie nodded. "Was it the basement?" "No. The garden," Ellie whispered. "There was a girl there. She was calling for her mom, but the dirt was too heavy." Mrs. Whitman felt a chill roll down her back. She stepped closer and hugged Ellie from behind. "You're safe now," she said softly. "You're not alone anymore." Ellie said nothing. But her hands were shaking. At the station, Lisa returned to her desk with a heaviness that hadn't lifted in days. The remains had been officially recovered. Forensics confirmed what they already suspected: it was Lena Dalton. 11 years old. Gone for over 3 years. Her body had been wrapped in a torn bedsheet. The sheet had tiny printed butterflies, matching the bracelet Ellie had remembered. Autopsy confirmed bruising. Older healed fractures. The same pattern of injuries they'd seen in Ellie and in Kayla's case file. And most chilling of all. Her fingernails were broken. Packed with dirt. She had tried to claw her way out. Lisa sat in the interview room again. Brandon Callan was brought in, shackled, silent. "We found her," Lisa said plainly. He didn't move. Buried behind the house. Same house Ellie described. Same bracelet. Same method. Still nothing. Lisa leaned forward. "You can sit there with your silence, but the world now knows what you are. You didn't just hurt one little girl. You hunted them." Brandon smirked. "You can't charge me with Kayla. You still haven't found her." Lisa stood. "We will." Then, as she turned to leave, Brandon said coldly. "She screamed, you know. The redhead. I told her no one was coming. Lisa paused. Just a second. Then walked out. Across town, Ellie's mother sat in a courtroom waiting area. Her eyes were puffy, makeup smudged from crying. She had been summoned for a formal hearing. Custody termination proceedings had begun. Child Services had determined she had been negligent. Ignored red flags. Failed to protect her daughter. As the judge entered, everyone stood. Marla sat beside Ellie at the front. Ellie refused to look back. Her mother tried to speak once, choking through tears. I didn't mean to. The judge raised a hand. This is not the time for emotion. It is a time for law. The hearing lasted 3 hours. And in the end, the gavel came down. Custody terminated. Permanently. Her mother collapsed into tears. Ellie stared at the wall, expressionless. When they left the courtroom, Marla asked softly, "How do you feel?" Ellie replied, "Like I don't have to pretend anymore." The media was now in a frenzy. Headlines dominated national news. Man charged in multi-state child abuse and murder case. Girls drawing leads to body discovery. From foster home to horror, what authorities missed for years. People demanded answers. How did this man, with no criminal record, slip through the system? How many more children had he hurt? And then, a woman came forward. Her name was Heather Klein. She lived 2 states away and had recognized Brandon's photo on TV. I dated him for 6 months, she told the local news. He seemed normal. Charming. But once, I found something strange in his car. A child's sock. He said it was his niece's. She had always wondered. She gave police access to her old text messages. One stood out. Gotta go check on my little guest. She's a handful. Dated 2.5 years ago. The same weekend Kayla Benson had disappeared. Back at the station, Lisa sat with Kayla's file again. The 10-year-old girl had vanished without a trace. No body. No DNA. Just a bracelet, and Ellie's drawing. She looked up at the evidence board. 2 photos stared back. Lena. Kayla. And beneath them, Ellie. Lisa exhaled. What if Kayla was still alive? That evening, Marla sat with Ellie again. We think, there might be another place, she said. Ellie tilted her head. A woman said she dated him. Around the time Kayla disappeared. Ellie's eyes widened. He took me once, far away. Not the cabin. Not the basement. Can you describe it? Ellie hesitated. It had big trees. And a train sound. At night. Marla's eyes widened. She pulled out a photo. This place? Ellie nodded instantly. Yes. That's it. Marla's voice shook. That's an old ranger station. He did roof repairs there once. It's been abandoned for years. The next morning, Lisa led a task force to the ranger station. Deep in the woods. Miles from the nearest town. Surrounded by pines. The building was locked. They broke the door. Inside, it smelled of mold, rust, and rotting food. Dust blanketed everything. But there were signs of disturbance. A dirty mattress. Cans of food. A child's coloring book. And then, scratched into the wood near the window. Kayla was here. Below it, a date, almost 2 years ago. She survived here, Lisa said, eyes wide. She might still be alive. The forest was alive with the sound of wind rustling through pines as the team approached the old ranger station. It stood forgotten at the edge of the national park, swallowed by time and trees. Peeling paint clung to the walls. the broken windows whispered secrets. And inside was the last known trace of a child missing for over 2 years. Lisa Grant stepped inside, gun drawn, flashlight sweeping over every shadow. "Kayla," she called gently. "If you're here, we're here to help you." No reply. Just the creak of floorboards beneath her boots. She reached the back room and saw it again, the mattress. Small. Stained. Covered in old, faded blankets. Nearby, a stack of coloring books, chewed crayons, and an empty juice box. A child had lived here. Alone or not, someone had kept her here. "Sir," one officer called from outside. Lisa hurried out. He pointed toward a disturbed patch of ground behind the station. Not dug up, but flattened. Like someone had camped or slept there. Next to it, a red hairband. Lisa's eyes widened. "Bag it," she said quickly. "We need to know how fresh this is." Back in the city, Ellie stared at the ceiling of the Whitmans' guest bedroom. She had barely slept. Her dreams had changed. This time, Kayla wasn't crying. She was running. Through the woods. Barefoot. Mud on her feet. Scratches on her arms. But her eyes, wide, desperate, and full of hope. "She's still out there," Ellie whispered. She sat up and reached for her drawing pad again. Her fingers moved quickly, urgently. She began sketching trees. Paths, rocks. Something in her memory unlocked. The cabin, the trees behind it, a creek, and then a small bridge. She didn't know why she remembered it now. But it felt important. She ran to the living room where Marla was reading a file. "She's not far," Ellie said breathlessly. "I saw her again. She went past the river. The bridge was made of metal. I saw her hiding in the hollow tree." Marla looked at her, stunned. "How do you?" "She showed me," Ellie insisted. "She's trying to come home." Lisa returned to the station that evening with new evidence from the ranger station. DNA on the juice box matched Kayla Benson. She had been alive at least 2 months ago. No signs of a grave. No blood. No body. And now, Ellie's new drawing offered more. "Where's that creek?" Lisa asked, spreading a map across the table. A young officer pointed. "About a mile east from the station. There's a metal footbridge. We used to camp there when I was a kid." Lisa's heart raced. She may have tried to escape. She may have made it that far. She radioed for a search team. "Bring dogs. Bring everything. We go at first light." Morning came foggy and thick. The sun barely broke through the dense forest canopy. A line of officers moved quietly, sweeping the area beyond the creek. "Kayla," they called again and again. "Kayla, it's okay. You're safe now." Birds scattered overhead. Twigs snapped beneath boots. Then, one dog barked. Loud. Sharp. Then another. Lisa ran. They reached the hollow tree from Ellie's drawing. It was real. And inside, an old sleeping bag. Crumbs. A chipped plastic cup. Then, a child's footprint in the mud. Tiny. Barefoot. Fresh. "She was here," one officer said, eyes wide. "Maybe hours ago." Lisa scanned the trees. "She's watching us," she whispered. "She's close. She's hiding." She stepped forward, hands raised. "Kayla," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You don't have to run anymore." Miles away, in a different world, Brandon Callan sat in his prison cell. Cold walls. No windows. Just his own darkness. He'd been charged now with 2 counts of child abuse, 1 confirmed murder, and a 3rd attempted homicide, Ellie's. He refused to speak further. But behind the steel door, a guard whispered, "They found the ranger station." Brandon's eyes didn't move. "She's alive, isn't she?" No answer. But a thin smile crossed his lips. Back in the forest, Lisa and her team continued the sweep. Then, movement. A flash of red behind a tree. "Stop!" Lisa cried. "We're here to help." But the figure darted. Thin. Fast. Dirty clothes. Matted red hair. The team sprinted after her. Branches snapped. Leaves flew. Then, she stumbled. Collapsed in a shallow dip in the earth. Lisa approached slowly. The girl curled into herself, arms over her face, shaking violently. "Don't hurt me," she screamed. "Please. I didn't tell anyone." Lisa dropped to her knees. "Kayla?" The girl looked up. Frightened eyes. It was her. The same girl from the photo. Older now. Thinner. But unmistakably, Kayla Benson. Tears streamed down Lisa's face. "You're safe now," she said. "No one will ever hurt you again." Kayla collapsed into her arms and sobbed. The hospital was ready. A special trauma team waited as Kayla was brought in. She was malnourished, dehydrated, covered in bruises and insect bites. Her arms bore scars, old and new. Her voice was hoarse from years of silence. But she was alive. Alive. When Ellie heard, she ran to Marla. "She's okay?" Ellie asked. "Yes," Marla said. "You helped us find her." Ellie clutched her drawing pad tightly. "Can I see her?" "Soon," Marla promised. "When she's ready." Kayla's recovery was slow. She barely spoke. When she did, it came in whispers. "I thought I was the only one," she said to Dr. Harper. "You were never alone," he replied. "There was someone who remembered you. A girl who never stopped trying to help." 1 week later, they arranged a meeting. A quiet room. A counselor present. No cameras. Ellie entered first, her hands trembling. Then Kayla was brought in. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then, Kayla ran to her. And they hugged. 2 survivors. 2 girls who had lived through nightmares, now in the same room, breathing the same safe air. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Their tears said it all. Outside the room, Lisa stood watching through the window. She had been a detective for 12 years. She had seen death, lies, and suffering. But this moment, the reunion of 2 broken girls, was something else entirely. It was hope. Back in court, Brandon Callan's trial date was set. Prosecutors had overwhelming evidence now. Ellie's testimony. Lena's body. Kayla's survival. DNA. Photos. Videos. He would never walk free again. And the system, finally, had to face the mirror. How had this man been allowed to foster children? How had the signs been missed? Lisa demanded answers. Background checks would be restructured. Emergency reporting systems were improved. And 2 little girls became the face of a movement. Ellie was adopted by the Whitmans 6 months later. She took their name. She smiled more. She danced in the garden. Kayla remained in recovery longer, but eventually, she too found a new family. And the first gift she gave her new parents? A drawing. Of 2 girls holding hands. And a red door, finally shut. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, child advocates, former foster parents, silent observers, all waited as the most anticipated trial of the year began. It wasn't just about a man anymore. It was about a system that failed. About children who begged for help and were met with silence. And now, the world was listening. Brandon Callen, shackled and stone-faced, sat at the defendant's table. His lawyers whispered to him, but he barely blinked. As if the world around him no longer concerned him. Across the room sat Ellie Whitman, no longer the silent girl in a hospital gown. Her posture was straight. Her adoptive mother held her hand gently. But Ellie didn't tremble this time. She stared forward with a calm steadiness far beyond her age. Kayla wasn't in the room that day. She couldn't be. Not yet. But her words would be read. And they would change everything. Day 1 of the trial. The prosecution began with a chilling statement. This man, the district attorney said, pacing slowly, hid behind the illusion of normalcy. He was trusted, by institutions, families, by mothers too frightened to face the truth. And behind closed doors, he became a predator. She paused. And these girls, they were not just victims. They were survivors. Brave. Smart. And they are the reason he is in this room today. Then came the evidence. Photos. Videos recovered from the cabin and ranger station. Testimonies from officers. Medical reports. And then, the children's drawings. Ellie's sketches had been entered as official evidence. Every courtroom screen displayed the haunting crayon depictions of a locked basement, a hollow tree, a girl with red hair crying through bars. One juror wiped away a tear. Ellie's testimony. The courtroom fell silent as Ellie took the stand. She sat small in the wooden chair, feet swinging above the ground, a glass of water beside her untouched. The judge leaned forward. "Take your time, sweetheart." Ellie nodded. The prosecutor asked gently, "Can you tell us what happened the day you begged not to go with Brandon?" Ellie looked out at the sea of strangers. Then she turned toward the jury. "I didn't want to go," she said clearly. "He scared me. He said my mom didn't want me anymore. He locked me in dark places. He said if I told, no one would believe me. But I told anyway." "Why did you finally tell the doctor?" She hesitated. "Because I had to. Because there was another girl once. And she never got to tell." In the middle of her testimony, someone in the back sobbed. It was Ellie's biological mother. She hadn't spoken since losing custody. But that moment, hearing her daughter speak, broke something inside her. "I failed her," she whispered to the social worker beside her. "I failed her so badly." The court bailiff offered her a tissue, but her shoulders kept shaking. Ellie never looked her way. She was no longer trying to be heard by someone who hadn't listened. She was speaking to everyone else now. Kayla's letter. On the third day of the trial, the judge approved a special motion. A counselor would read a written letter aloud, from Kayla Benson. It was her victim impact statement. A nurse stood, cleared her throat, and began to read. "I was 10 when he took me. I thought it was just for a weekend. He had toys, juice, even a dog. He made it seem like everything would be fun. But then, he locked the door. And everything stopped being fun. I was cold. I was hungry. Sometimes he forgot to bring food. He made me sleep on the floor. He told me no one was looking for me. But I never forgot my mom. Or the stars. I would count them from the crack in the roof. That's how I stayed alive." When I saw Ellie, I wanted to tell her to run. I wanted to scream. But I was too afraid. So I tried to survive long enough that someone would find me. And Ellie did. Ellie saved me. I am not broken. I am healing. I am alive. The room was silent when the letter ended. Some jurors wept openly. The judge took a long pause before speaking again. And Brandon Callan, for the first time, looked down. Not in shame. Not in guilt. But in fear. The kind of fear only truth brings. The verdict. After 2 weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and mounting evidence, the jury returned. 12 people. 12 lives forever changed by what they heard. The judge asked, "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" The foreperson stood. "Yes, Your Honor." The charges were read one by one. Aggravated child abuse, guilty. Kidnapping, guilty. Murder of Lena Dalton, guilty. Attempted murder of Kayla Benson, guilty. Child endangerment, guilty. Unlawful imprisonment, guilty. Every verdict landed like thunder in the room. Brandon Callan was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. The courtroom exhaled. Justice, at last. The aftermath. Ellie and Kayla became symbols. Not just of survival, but of resilience. Their story inspired legislation across multiple states. Background checks for foster guardians were intensified. Emergency tip lines were funded. Anonymous reporting systems were made more accessible for children in care. Schools began using drawings as therapeutic evidence for trauma detection. Children were encouraged to speak up, and believed when they did. Ellie's adoption ceremony. 6 months later, in a small courtroom on the other side of the city, Ellie stood between Mr. and Mrs. Whitman. Judge Thompson smiled kindly. "Ellie, do you know what this means?" he asked. Ellie nodded. "It means I'm not going back." "That's right," he said. "You are now legally a Whitman." The gavel struck. And Ellie smiled wider than anyone had ever seen. Kayla's new beginning. Kayla was placed with a family of child psychologists who had prepared for months to receive her. It wasn't easy, she had trauma, fear of loud noises, and didn't sleep through the night for weeks. But slowly, the girl who once hid in hollow trees began to sing again. She played piano. She drew stars. And one night, she wrote in her journal, "When I grow up, I want to help lost kids. Like Ellie helped me." The lesson. In the final moments of this story, let's pause. Not to mourn, but to remember. Ellie's voice wasn't just brave. It was revolutionary. She reminded the world that children see what adults refuse to. That silence can be fatal, and that listening can save a life. That monsters don't always live in the woods. Sometimes, they live inside the homes we think are safe. But so do heroes. And sometimes, they're only 8 years old. Final scene. Years later, at a conference for child welfare and justice, a young woman stepped up to the podium. She wore a blue ribbon on her wrist and carried a drawing in her hand. It showed 2 girls, one with dark hair, one with red, walking away from a red door and into the light. "My name is Ellie Whitman," she said into the microphone. "And I was once told I wouldn't be believed. But I was. And because of that, I'm here. And so is she." In the front row, Kayla smiled, clapping softly, tears in her eyes. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Not for a survivor, but for a warrior.